One of the most confusing things about human behavior is that insight does not always create change. People often know what they should do. They know the relationship is unhealthy. They know the habit is causing problems. They know the boundary needs to be set. They know the conversation needs to happen. And yet the pattern continues. At first glance, this seems irrational, almost as if they don't have any power in the matter. If somebody understands the problem, why not simply do something different? Why do intelligent, self-aware people sometimes find themselves repeating the same behaviors year after year? Many people assume lasting change happens when a person finally discovers the right answer, the right book, the right strategy, the right insight, the right piece of advice. Yet experienced therapists often notice something different. Understanding is important, but understanding and change are not the same thing. This distinction appears throughout therapy. A client may describe a pattern with remarkable clarity. They know exactly where it came from. They understand how it affects their life. They can explain it in detail. And yet the pattern remains active. This can be frustrating for the client, for the people around them, sometimes even for beginning therapists. After all, if the person already understands the problem, what is missing? Part of the answer lies in recognizing that human beings are not governed by insight alone. People are shaped by habits, emotions, relationships, expectations. They live within an ecosystem of experiences. And many of these forces operate beneath conscious awareness. Imagine someone who struggles to say no. They constantly overcommit. They take responsibility for other people's problems. They become exhausted, resentful, overwhelmed. Eventually, they recognize the pattern, the game they've been playing. They understand it intellectually. Yet the next time someone asks for help, they agree again. Why? Because understanding the pattern is not the same thing as changing the conditions that maintain it. The behavior may be connected to something deeper. Guilt, fear of rejection, fear of disappointing others, a desire to feel needed, a desire to feel wanted, a belief that their worth depends upon helping. The behavior serves a purpose, even when it creates difficulties. This is something therapists often become curious about. Rather than asking, "Why won't this person change?" they begin asking, "What might this pattern be doing for them?" This question changes everything, because behaviors that appear self-defeating often make more sense when viewed through the lens of adaptation. At some point, the pattern may have been useful, protective, necessary, understandable. Consider somebody who avoids conflict. Perhaps they grew up in an environment where disagreement felt dangerous. Perhaps conflict regularly led to criticism, rejection, anger, withdrawal. Avoidance may have become a creative solution to a difficult environment. Years later, the environment changes, but the pattern remains. Not because the person is choosing it consciously, because the nervous system has learned something, and lessons learned through experience are not always changed through insight alone. This is one reason therapists often move more slowly than people expect. The goal is not simply to identify patterns. The goal is to understand them, because understanding creates compassion, and compassion often creates room for change. Without understanding, people frequently respond to their own patterns with frustration. Why am I still doing this? What's wrong with me? I should know better by now. These reactions usually create more shame, and shame rarely helps people change. Therapists often become interested in a different question. Not, "Why are you doing this?" but, "What makes this pattern understandable?" The answer is not always obvious. Sometimes it emerges gradually, across conversations, across relationships, across experiences, piece by piece. As understanding deepens, something interesting begins to happen. People stop seeing themselves as broken and start seeing themselves as human. They begin recognizing that many patterns were attempts to solve problems, attempts to create safety, connection, predictability, acceptance. This does not mean the pattern should remain unchanged. It means the path to change often begins with understanding rather than criticism. Ironically, this can feel counterintuitive. Many people believe change requires more pressure, more discipline, more self-judgment. Yet therapists frequently observe that change becomes more possible when people understand themselves more clearly. Because understanding reduces the need for defense, the need for denial, the need to protect against uncomfortable truths. This is where therapy often becomes different from ordinary advice. Advice tends to focus on what should happen next. Therapy often becomes interested in what has been happening all along. Patterns are rarely random. They usually tell a story about adaptation, learning, relationships, experience. The challenge is learning how to read that story. This is why therapists spend so much time exploring things that may initially seem unrelated. Childhood experiences, family dynamics, important relationships, recurring themes. They are often searching for the origins of the pattern, not to assign blame, but to create understanding. Because when people understand how a pattern developed, they often become less frightened by it, less ashamed of it, less controlled by it. And this creates something important: choice. Perhaps the most significant difference between an automatic pattern and genuine change is the presence of choice. People may not always control the thoughts, emotions, or impulses that arise, but they can gradually develop more awareness of them. And awareness creates options. Options create flexibility. Flexibility creates change. This process rarely happens overnight. Most meaningful change unfolds gradually, moment by moment, decision by decision, conversation by conversation. Which brings us back to where we began. Why do people keep repeating the same patterns? Not because they are weak, not because they lack intelligence, not because they have failed to understand. Often because the pattern has become woven into the way they learn to navigate the world. And patterns rarely disappear simply because somebody points them out. They change when understanding creates enough space for something new to emerge. Perhaps this is one of the most important things therapists learn. People are not problems to be solved. They are stories to be understood. And understanding often becomes the beginning of change. In our next video, we'll explore something that sits underneath many of these patterns. Because before people can explore difficult emotions, challenge old beliefs, or try something new, another question often needs to be answered first. Do they feel safe enough to do it? We'll explore that next.